What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz Siddiqui. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. Zach, what's good? We're going into week 9. I was just texting you this morning, dude. It's already week 9.
Yeah,
We're past the halfway point of the are we past the halfway point of the
we're
NFL
well
season
past the
2?
halfway point for the regular season, for
And
fantasy football at least. And
that's all that matters. Let's be honest.
yeah,
Let's be honest here, right? Like
once
the fantasy football season is over, it's like, what do you got to look forward to with the playoffs? Like the
Mhm.
actual NFL playoffs? Like who cares? No, but listen, man, I'm a sucker for NFL playoffs, man. Like
Yeah.
I enjoy those games so much. Like I will like literally, base my days around, and those weekends around those games. And I those are the only games that I like to watch. Like I sit down and like to watch one game. With
Yeah.
Red Zone now, right? It's really hard. It's definitely affected my attention span,
Yeah,
right?
we're a
And
little
I do
spoiled.
watch a lot. I do watch a lot of these games after the fact, but things like Game Pass helps with that because there's no commercials and you can get through a game in 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah,
So it's not too bad. So you don't have to like worry about like commercials and breaks between plays and stuff like that. But Red Zone definitely affected the way I watch football for sure.
I think it's for the best. I love Red Zone. I'd be really upset if it wasn't a thing.
I know,
we're,
dude.
we're a little bit spoiled. That's all, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Red
That's
Zone was
okay.
built. It was built specifically for the purpose of fantasy football. It's
100%.
literally exactly what you want to see. Unless it's Jonathan Taylor. I'm cutting the Jonathan Taylor 5 times for 5 touchdowns last season. And not so much. But I was playing against him that week. But, it's fine.
It seems like a distant memory when Jonathan Taylor was scoring
right. Yeah.
that many touchdowns. I don't want to hear it.
Those scars are deep. It's going to take a little while for me to get over that.
For sure, man. All right. Let's get into some news. Keenan Allen said that his hamstring got worse during the bye.
Awesome. How does that happen?
That is terrible news if you have Keenan Allen. And I would not expect him to play this week. And it's possible he misses more time after that. It's already week 9, Keenan. You haven't played. You played week 1. That was basically it. You played before the bye. We thought that you coming back before the bye was a good sign. Apparently not. So I wouldn't hold out hope on Keenan Allen for this season. Don't drop him. Okay. He said he will not take the field until he's 100% this time. Who knows when that will be?
Yeah.
But it sucks right now. Now, Josh Palmer becomes a very solid play without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. He's basically their wide receiver 1 at this point. I guess Austin Eckler's their wide receiver 1, but Gerald Everett is next up, right? Like I don't need to talk about Austin Eckler that much. He's obviously getting his. But DeAndre Carter, I think he's a flex play, right? He has some big play upside. He's going to be on the field a lot without these two guys on the field. He had a 93% route participation in week 7 and a 13% target share. So if you're struggling, he's an option. Those numbers can go up. And he's going up against Atlanta this week. And that's part of the reason why, Justin Herbert is still a viable option, even without his weapons, because they're going up against a very bad defense.
Yeah. I think that, with Josh Palmer and even DeAndre Carter, they're not going to be able to step in. I'm not expecting them to step in and just be like, awesome starts. Even though Josh Palmer seems like he's going to be the de facto wide receiver 1, Austin Eckler is still there. And for some reason, Justin Herbert just does not look like Justin Herbert this year. So this isn't a slam dunk play, even though if this was Justin Herbert looking like Justin Herbert, it would be. It isn't really a slam dunk play for me. I'm thinking that unless they score touchdowns, it's going to be, relatively quiet day. I think they're going to run the offense through Austin Eckler. And they've been succeeding doing that. Austin Eckler's been doing his thing, and he's been able to produce. So I'm not a humongous fan of these guys. Like I said, they're going to be solid, like you said, but I don't think that they have the upside that they would present if Justin Herbert looked like he was, playing well.
Yeah, and he's not throwing the ball down the field a ton, and I don't know if that's going to happen in this game without those guys.
Right.
Jonathan Taylor didn't practice this week with that re-aggravated ankle injury. Well, not this week. He didn't practice on Wednesday. It's Thursday today, just in case you're listening to this later on. So there's a chance he plays. Okay. I just make sure that Deion Jackson isn't just sitting over there on your waiver wire. Whether you have Taylor or not, just remember what he did last time around. Obviously, the receiving game was a big part of it. We don't know if he'll get peppered like he would without Matt Ryan. But if Jonathan Taylor is out, Deion Jackson will likely be the bell cow for the Colts, and that means that he'll likely put up some fantasy points. All right.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good play. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same exact kind of, game script where Deion Jackson's catching 10 of 10 targets. That was Matt Ryan playing quarterback then. And Sam Ehlinger seems like he's a little bit more dynamic. And, he's technically a rookie, in terms of games started. His experience, those inexperienced guys tend to try to do a little too much, push the ball downfield. Try to stay away from the check down because that's pretty boring at this point. And it seems like they have nothing to lose. So I don't think Deion Jackson's going to be catching 10 balls, but I think that the receiving work, could kind of end up falling his way with, Nyheim Hines now out of the picture as well.
He's a good pickup, man, because listen, if this injury lingers for Jonathan Taylor and
which it
he
has
ends up aggravating again or whatever, the Colts not being in the picture, like, there might be a chance they shut Jonathan Taylor down. Like, there is that possibility. Okay. And I would put that percentage on that at like 10%. I don't think it's that high that they shut him down this year at some point. But for that off chance that it happens, Deion Jackson, is going to be like a top 20 running back, for the rest of the season, whenever that does happen, if that ever happens. Okay. So just wanted to put that out there as a possibility, because why would you, put a, Jonathan Taylor out there with one leg, with one ankle, on the field when you're not really winning games? What's the point? They might not go that route. They might not want to do that, but just put it out there as something to think about. Okay.
Yeah. I think they'd have to lose a few more games before I really consider that as a possibility. I don't think that's happening right now.
It's not happening right now.
They really have to. 9. Yeah. They'd have to really go down the toilet for that to happen, because at that point, it's like, why add the extra wear and tear? And in a deep quarterback class, if they could get anywhere within like the top 15, they might be able to snag somebody. They're in need of help at quarterback. So maybe they think long-term, play the long game. I guess they could do that later on, but I wouldn't expect that anytime before the fantasy playoffs. I think that then fantasy playoffs start week 14, 15 for most people. Is that what it is?
I mean, they're only 2 games behind Tennessee right now. Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like they'd have to be out of the picture.
And there's a good chance that Tennessee loses this week against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So, they're not out of it or anything, or by any means. But this is more of a thought later on in the season, weeks 14, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Around that time.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Let's see. Cooper Kupp didn't practice on Wednesday because of a sprained ankle. He's expected to play, but it's not guaranteed. Just keep monitoring that as we go through the week. DeAndre Swift didn't practice on Wednesday after Dan Campbell said he wasn't completely ready last week, and he obviously is not completely ready at this point if he's still missing practice. But that's a Wednesday. Hopefully gets a full practice in at some point this week. But him missing practice on Wednesday, it just kind of like adds more gloom to the situation. You would have hoped that he at least gets limited in on Wednesday, right?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, which, as we talked about yesterday, I think that's opening the buy window a little bit more. But that's a conversation for yesterday's episode. You can tune into that one and hear what we had to say about DeAndre Swift there. But, with him missing practice, it's a little bit, discouraging. I think that he's going to practice at some point this week. I think as long as he practices, he's going to play. But, I wish he would get a full practice in. That tells you, any type of practice in, yesterday would have been nice. But the fact that he might not get a full practice in up until, game day, and he might not even, be on a safe snap count there for fantasy relevance, it's a little discouraging. But that's why I'm saying if we see another one of these weeks where he produces right in the middle of the pack and it's not exactly up to standard, his work is still cut a little bit, I think that would really do wonders for his value in trades if you're trying to buy him. I think that would bring his price down to a point where you could get him super cheap, even cheaper than you can get him right now. And right now he's very viable.
Are you playing Jamal Williams or DeAndre Swift this week?
Yeah, I'm going to look at the practice reports this week and see if it looks like DeAndre Swift is going to be on snap count again. Usually,
let's say he gets a full practice in on Friday. Let's say he gets a limited in today. Gets a full on Friday.
I say that I'm starting Swift, and I know you have that ranked differently. I don't know if you have that scenario. We'll talk about the running backs obviously here later in this episode, but I know you have it differently. So I don't know if that's a scenario you're anticipating. What are you anticipating for this week? I mean, I know it's hard to project injuries.
I'm anticipating something very similar to what we saw last week in terms of workload.
Right. Okay.
I'm not expecting. He can do a lot with his touches, right? It's DeAndre Swift, right? He can get 10 touches and get you 130 yards.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He's that type of guy. I'm playing Jamal Williams, though.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like it's a good matchup on the ground. He can get some volume, and he's the goal line guy. That's kind of how I feel this week.
He has that floor.
The rest of the season, obviously I'd rather have Swift. But,
and if you start him, and he scores 1 touchdown, he's good for 2. So, that's the way it's been this season.
It's either 0 or 2. That's true.
Yeah.
All right. Alan Lazard, he practiced on Wednesday, which is a good sign that he might be able to play this week. Monitor his status throughout the week, but that's a good sign. Andy Reid said he's going to try and work Kadarius Toney in this week to get him to play in week 9. He's obviously tough to play this week, but I'll probably wait a week. Even though it's exciting that he's actually healthy and he's playing for the Chiefs, I'd probably wait a week just to see how much he's integrated, this first week with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I would temper expectations. Obviously, we know what he can be. We talk about his yards per route run statistic, kind of blowing everybody out of the water besides Jamar Chase. Was that his rookie year? Yeah, just last year. So obviously he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. He can get things done. And we've seen that playmaking ability even when he was on the Giants, which are a less than, fantastic offense. With Patrick Mahomes, you have to wonder what his ceiling is. The wide receiver room's a little crowded, but like we talked about, I think when he first got traded, I think he could kind of, move up head and shoulders above the rest of the receivers. Maybe Juju will retain, a decent target share because he's been getting that the whole season. The production is just now starting to catch up these last 2 weeks. That could continue to happen. It would be nice if they could get a 1-2 with Juju and Kadarius Toney. I think that would be something sustainable, especially with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. And Kadarius Toney would be more of the big play threat, I think, over Juju. So if you have a big play threat on the Chiefs offense with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, obviously he's going to have a lot more value than he did on the Giants, where he was getting used little to none. I mean, he's being used behind Wan'Dale Robinson. And that's not any shade at Wan'Dale Robinson, but it's just they just picked him up in the second round of the draft, and they seem to trust him more on the field. Obviously, the injury scandal, if you want to call it that, definitely played a little bit into it. But I like Kadarius Toney. Maybe not this week, like you said, temper expectations, but long-term rest of the season, I think that he could have some nice value.
Cordell Patterson is back in practice for the Falcons. He began his 21-day practice window, and the Falcons can activate him at any point during that time. And we'll see when he'll be back. He said he's at 90% himself. So we'll see, if they choose to activate him this week or the following week. My guess would be the following week, but we'll see.
Yeah.
When he's back, I'd say he's probably like an RB2 start right away, in his first game back. And whenever they do activate him, I'm sure he'll be good to go.
The way the Falcons run the ball and use running backs in general, it's not only just running the ball that they're using running backs for. Obviously Tyler Algier has been getting receiving work. I think that when he comes back, I think RB2 is like his floor kind of. And I'm not saying I'm overly excited. I'm not saying you're going to be able to have him with RB1 upside every week, but I think that, what he's going to give you is going to be very similar to what we saw at the beginning of the season. Hopefully there's no second half die out like there was last season, but obviously the backfield has more capable runners than it looked like we were going to have heading into the season. Obviously Tyler Algier has panned out a little bit, as a receiver, and Caleb Huntley's doing his thing, but I'm not sure, they'd have to have Huntley on the field a whole lot if Cordell Patterson can take the majority of the rushing snaps, and then Tyler Algier can continue to do things in the passing game.
Yeah, it would probably be those two, Patterson and Algier. Yeah. That would be my guess. We'll see what happens when Dameon Williams is back. I have no idea where he falls in the pecking order, but he was on IR, so we'll see what happens with him.
I think at this point, before we go on, I think at this point with Dameon Williams having missed so much time, I think he's just kind of an odd man out. I think that I'm not sure if he's going to get a whole lot of work coming back, especially with the way the rest of these running backs are playing, and the offense is doing well. There's really no need to, fix it if it isn't broken. And obviously they're 4-4, but I think they have the guys in the backfield. I wouldn't be surprised if, I'm not going to say they're going to cut him, but I don't think they really have a necessity for another running back on the roster at this point. I mean, Caleb Huntley's doing it. So I think that we could see him kind of be an odd man out.
I don't know, man. I don't know about that. I mean, he was the RB1 coming into the season, right? So I don't know if that's the case. I think he's going to compete, and he might be able to. He might be the RB2. He might be the RB2 on this team, behind Cordell Patterson.
Yeah,
it's very possible. I can see it happen. I can see it happen. At the very least, maybe he's a better running back than Caleb Huntley.
Yeah,
these running backs have looked good because the Falcons' offensive line has been really, really good.
Yeah,
and they've been
mauling.
opening up crazy holes. Yeah, seriously, and and you mentioned that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. It's like he's one of those running backs where like I'm not really holding on any type of hope for fantasy purposes, but I can see him being a part of some sort of rotation at some point.
Just to throw off, Cordell Patterson, just so he can have, those 2 or 3 rough weeks where you wonder, okay, is this guy going to be a solid RB2 for me, or is he a low end RB2 with upside? Like, I think that's what he's going to end up doing if he does anything. But like I said, if I had to bet, I'm not a gambling man, but if I had to bet, I think Tyler Algier has done enough that they're happy to have him at RB2, and that Dameon Williams will kind of be floating underneath them on the depth chart. That's just me, though, from what I've seen.
I am a gambling man. And we're going to talk about some underdog, pick'ems for tonight's game.
Yeah.
And so let's get into the Thursday Night Football preview. The Texans are going to have no wide receivers left tonight against the Eagles. Brandon Cooks probably won't play. He's been frustrated through this trade process, and he hasn't been practicing. So, and then you have Nico Collins, who isn't playing either because of a groin injury. And their whole offense is going to be Dameon Pierce. If they even have an offense at all tonight against an Eagles team, they should probably just wave the white flag to and save everyone some time. I know that's tough to say, but this is not looking like a great matchup.
But for us, they're wearing their battle red helmets. Like, come on.
Oh,
they're wearing the battle reds. They can't wave a white flag now. They got those spiffy unis on. Yeah, that's what it is.
No. I think you're onto something here, and I think the Eagles are 13-point favorites in this game, right? But our sponsor for this episode, Preciser, who is a data and algorithm-based projection platform, they're expecting a trap game, according to their website.
Really?
They're expecting the Eagles to win, but they have a projected score for this game at 22-21. Eagles win.
I don't know.
Whatever algorithm is producing that has some cojones. That algorithm, that computer, that AI, whatever it is, got some cojones. Okay, we'll see how it turns out tonight.
Yeah.
But just some words about Preciser as a thank you for sponsoring this episode. Like I said, they're a data-driven analytics and algorithm platform. They help you make game predictions to help you make better bets, help you make better start-sit decisions, make better DFS lineups, and I'll have the link in the description, but you can check them out at preciser.io/prediction. Make sure you use the code UPPERHAND to get 30% off the first 3 months of their pro package. That ends up coming out to only $6.99 a month to get all their data. They have their free package as well. They have a jersey giveaway that's up on my Instagram right now. So you can go check that out. And yeah, so if you don't want to commit, you can check out the free package, but make sure you use the code UPPERHAND when you do sign up. Right. But going back to this game, Miles Sanders, right? Like I don't know who's right here, Vegas or Preciser, but at the end of the day, like this is a really good matchup. However, the Eagles went up big against the Steelers last week, and they ended up using a committee towards the end of that game. And Miles Sanders had less than 10 carries, even though he was extremely efficient. And this is a great game on matchup on paper for Sanders, but does he end up doing his thing?
I think with whatever carries he's going to get, he's going to do really well. We saw Derrick Henry just tear this defense apart last week. And I'm not saying that Miles Sanders is Derrick Henry. He's far from it. And it's not to, throw shade at Miles Sanders. He's just a different running back. And the way that he's being used, I think his ceiling is a little bit capped just because of his usage. His talent is there. I think he's going to have a very good night. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes over 20 fantasy points. I think that, if they're going to go up, which I assume that the Eagles are going to, they could end up using him to kind of salt the game away. I think that we're going to see a little bit more of Kenneth Gainwell, maybe some Boston Scott mixed in towards the end of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if Miles Sanders' night is relatively done by the third quarter, unless this game's close, which I don't expect. But I like Miles Sanders as a start this week. I know we have him ranked a little bit higher than he usually is, but this is just an ideal matchup. This Houston Texans defense, the rush defense, is pretty horrific.
It really is, man. It really is. And you're right. If he all he needs is 13 carries.
Yeah, that's it. He's going to have a touchdown. All right. Let's put it that way. He's going to have a touchdown.
I think so. I would say so.
Is that an underdog prop? Can we get that?
It is not, but you know what, man? I'm kind of scared about that one. I'm actually not touching Miles Sanders tonight.
All right.
His rushing yard, higher or lower is at like 78 yards or something like that, And I'm not touching it.
I
The ones
go,
I am,
I wouldn't go with the yardage bet. That would not
right.
be
That's
mine.
what I'm saying.
I wouldn't go with the yardage bet, but definitely a touchdown. I think a touchdown bet I would go with.
Yeah, and they don't have that, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
however, Derek Stingley, right, who is the cornerback, the rookie cornerback for the Texans, like he's looked good this year. However, he's given up some plays, okay?
Mhm.
And there's a chance that he shadows AJ Brown. There's a good chance he shadows AJ Brown this game. He's allowed the most yards per route run against him in the NFL among qualifying quarterbacks. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to go with the over, with the higher on yards for AJ Brown at 74.5 receiving. I'm going to go over that line.
Yeah.
I'm also going to go under on the yards for Devontae Smith at 55.5 because the Texans, outside of that, have been pretty solid on the perimeter. And Devontae Smith has gone lower than that in 3 of his last 4 games. Okay.
Yeah.
I like Jake Elliott, the kicker for the Eagles, to go over 1.5 field goals tonight, with the Eagles probably going up in this game. So I would expect them to, move the ball and be able to kick some field goals when they're up.
Yeah.
And then I have Davis Mills under 219.5 passing yards. Because who is he throwing the ball to?
Yeah.
I just don't see it. I don't see a lot of production here. Okay. And then I have Dameon Pierce over 16 rushing attempts because I kind of feel like they're going to close their eyes, not look at the scoreboard, and just keep feeding him the ball.
Yeah.
Even if they're down, I think Pierce is just going to get the ball. So on the ground. And that's kind of where the Eagles' vulnerability is, on the ground. And I would, attack that if I was the Texans. So I think Dameon Pierce gets over, higher than 16 rushing attempts. So, if you put all 5 of these into an entry, which is the max amount you can put in an entry on Underdog, you're going to 20 extra money. Okay. So if you put in $50, you're going to end up with $1,000 at the end of the night. If all of these come right, you could choose 3, which will 6x your money. You can choose 4, which will 10x your money, or you can choose all 5, and that will 20 extra money here. All right. Make sure you use the code UPPERHAND on Underdog Fantasy. That will double your deposit up to $100. So you get some free money to play with. Why not? All right. Yeah. So enjoy tonight's game if you can. It might not be great, but this will definitely help you enjoy it for sure because you'll have some stuff to root for. All right.
Yeah. If they're trying to make Prime Video any more enticing, could they pick a better game, right?
What Prime Video needs to do is put Underdog, all the Underdog over-unders, higher lowers on the side, right? Yeah. And have just an Underdog view. That'll be amazing.
Did you see that? They have is it Prime Vision or something as an alternate broadcast where they show real-time stats and stuff like that? They need to put Underdog stuff there. All the betting, because that's all anyone cares about tonight. We know how the game's going to end. So that would be pretty funny. But yeah, if the Texans are going to do anything tonight, if they're going to make it anything close to a football game, it's going to be through Dameon Pierce. So
100%.
I'm not overly excited about it because this Eagles defense is good. I'm not sure Dameon Pierce, he's very good, but I don't think he can be a one-man show on an offense that has Davis Mills, and no receivers. They know what they're going to be doing the whole game. It's going to be a tough night for Dameon Pierce. He'll be sore tomorrow for sure.
And the good thing about he will be sore tomorrow. And the good thing about Dameon Pierce is that last week he got the 2-minute offense. He's kind of turning into an every down back here. So if that's the case, hopefully he gets peppered in the passing game when they do go down.
Yeah,
if they do go down.
All right, maybe we're writing them up too much.
Let's get into the quarterback. Let's get into the quarterback rankings. Let's get into it. We have Josh Allen at number 1. No surprise. Doesn't matter what the matchup is. Jalen Hurts at number 2. Also doesn't matter what the matchup is tonight. He's going to do his thing. Patrick Mahomes at 3 in a good matchup at home against Tennessee. Then we have Lamar Jackson at 4. He'll be without Rashad Bateman. He might be without Mark Andrews. If Mark Andrews is out, he'll have Isaiah Likely, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But
that's a 1-for-1 replacement in my book.
Yeah, pretty much.
Obviously, Mark Andrews is very good. You can't say Isaiah Likely is Mark Andrews, but Lamar is clearly just as happy throwing Isaiah Likely as he is Mark Andrews. So I think that's even though Mark Andrews would be out, it's not as big a loss as maybe Rashad Bateman. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Lamar might not just have the upside without these two guys, but the very, very high floor is always there for Lamar. So you're going to have him in your lineup.
Definitely.
At number 5, we have Kyler Murray. He had one of his best fantasy days against Minnesota last week. threw for 326 yards, which was a season high, and it was his first 3 passing touchdown game this season. This is what we were expecting from Kyler Murray coming into the year.
Yeah. It was a lot closer to what we were expecting from Kyler Murray coming into the year. I had higher expectations. I've seen what he's done to start the past 2 seasons where he had multiple games over 30 points. He's just tearing it up on the ground and through the air, just going crazy. Obviously, missing DeAndre Hopkins hurt him a little bit, and he's looked a lot better these past 2 games, with DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup. And Rondale Moore is coming on too, so that's been helping him out a lot. I think that we're going to see more games like this moving forward. I don't think this game against Seattle is going to be like it was the last time they played. I think that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had them pick Geno Smith and Kyler Murray, pegged for big games, and it didn't really happen. It finished like 19-9. It was just weird. But both defenses showed up to play that day. I think we're going to see something a lot different from that this time around in Arizona. It's at home. So for Kyler Murray, I think it's going to be really good. DeAndre Hopkins is back in the lineup. I think we're going to start to see, some high-end fantasy football Kyler Murray gameplay. I think we're going to see more of what we saw last week than what we saw the first few weeks. I like him at 5 this week. I think he's one of the safest options with one of the nicest ceilings given, the floor they had.
And imagine when Hollywood comes back.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I have Kyler Murray in a couple leagues, and when Hollywood comes back, and if Hopkins stays healthy too, you might be looking at some serious upside in the fantasy playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
That's the hope. That's what happens. So holding out hope for Kyler Murray to have that ceiling at some point when the best, the best possible time he can potentially hit that ceiling.
Obviously, last week was very encouraging from what we saw the first few weeks. I remember I said, was it last week? I said, if Kyler Murray doesn't have a good day against the Vikings, it's time to hit the panic button. Yeah. Luckily, the panic button has made its way to the edge of my desk. It's not gone completely, but it was before. It was right here, front and center. I could slap it just like that. Now it's just to the side of my desk, right to the edge. So I'm not worried about him right now. If he can have another good game, panic button's gone. I'm ready for Kyler Murray to come back and have a good end to the fantasy season.
I have Justin Fields as my 6th ranked quarterback this week, ahead of Justin Herbert, ahead of Geno Smith, ahead of Joe Burrow. 2 straight monster games from him in New England and in Dallas.
Yeah.
2 tough matchups, and he came through big time. Top 12 quarterback each of the last 4 weeks, and now he goes up against Miami, a team who can put up points. They have given up the 4th most passing yards this year. They picked off quarterbacks only 4 times so far this year, and they've given up the 5th most rushing yards to quarterback, mainly thanks to Lamar Jackson having a 100-yard game against them early this year. But Fields also has a new wide receiver in Chase Claypool, and I think he continues the ascension that we've seen from him over the past few games.
I think this is the perfect spot to do it against a Dolphins team that is very offense-centered. Obviously they just picked up Bradley Chubb. So that makes this a little bit more concerning because, we've seen Justin Fields struggle a little bit against a good pass rush, but he's kind of put that to rest. He's kind of quieted a little bit. Obviously, he still takes some sacks, and, that's just how it's going to be against some good defenses in the Patriots and the Cowboys. But for the most part, he got it done, and he's been able to produce despite, being sacked a few times. The offense is looking like it's being catered towards him now. He's no longer being forced to fit into an offense that's just a run-heavy scheme. He's dropping back more, and we said that hasn't necessarily translated to more passing attempts, but it allows him opportunities to scramble too. It's just like a perfect storm. Obviously on the heels of his best game, he gets Chase Claypool, like you said. Now he's going back home. I think that this is a really nice spot for him to, kind of solidify himself here in the top 10, maybe even the top 5. I like Justin Fields, his upside more than Justin Herbert at this point, because now Justin Herbert's missing a bunch of weapons that he has. Obviously Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are out. So, and he hasn't looked the same, like we said. So I think Justin Fields at 6, it might seem a little bit aggressive, but I think that, from a fantasy perspective, they might not be winning games, but he's getting it done for you each week because of his rushing floor, which is really nice. I think he has rush touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 games. So it might be 3. I don't know. But I'm not sure. But the rushing upside's there. I like him a lot, much more so than Justin Herbert at this point.
The battle of the Justins, you're going with Justin Fields.
And the funny thing is, I have both of them in one league, and I'm starting Justin Fields. So,
I love that.
There you go. So I have the empirical data to back up my claim. I'm not just telling you guys to start Justin Fields, and then I'm going to turn around and start Justin Herbert. No, I'm starting Justin Fields this week.
So yes, Justin Fields has scored over the last 2 games.
Yeah,
on the ground, each of the last 2 games. Who else? So I mentioned Justin Herbert at excuse me. I mentioned Justin Herbert at 7. Still fairly confident in him this week, despite not having his primary weapons, but it's Atlanta, and he can get it done. So I'm okay starting him this week. Tua at 10 against Chicago. Solid play this week, given the weapons he has at his disposal. Kirk Cousins at 11 against Washington. He has an upgrade at tight end in TJ Hawkinson. We'll see how much he plays this week. But either way, it's a solid matchup for him. Trevor Lawrence at 12. I like him this week. The Raiders have given up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. So I think he's a pretty solid play.
Yeah, and obviously Trevor Lawrence didn't have a very awesome day in London. It was his first. Was it his first time going over there, or his second time going over there to London? So obviously,
it might be second.
I think it was the second. Yeah, because they won. Was it last year? I forget who they beat. The Dolphins. Funny enough, but yeah, before last week where he had a bit of an abomination of a game, obviously against a good Denver defense. The past 2 weeks before that, he was getting it done. I think he's good enough to the point where, again, in a good matchup against the Raiders defense has just been torn apart this season. I think that he can get it done. He still has his full complement of weapons. He's finding a connection with, Evan Engram of all people. Travis Etienne is going to be turning it up, and that gives him, something to lean on when they have to. So he doesn't have to throw the ball downfield the whole time. He just check it down and have Travis Etienne make plays. I think at this point, there's enough weapons in the Jags offense, and they're desperate enough that they'll be throwing a lot, that this could end up being a good game. It could end up being a shootout. These are two really desperate teams with rough-ish defenses and, enough playmakers on offense to make this interesting in terms of a scoring perspective. So I like Trevor Lawrence here. I think this is a good ranking for him.
At 13, I have Aaron Rodgers against Detroit, followed by Marcus Mariota. Tom Brady all the way down at 15, unfortunately. How are you feeling about Brady against the Rams this week? Is this too low?
I don't think it's too low. I mean, when I look at this game, I'm like, how the mighty have fallen. Because this was, the divisional round game last year? Or was it the wild card? I forget what it was. But it was...
I think it was divisional.
Yeah. And that was a really good game. But it's like, how these teams have come down to earth, since then. It's not as exciting of a matchup for me on paper. And neither of these quarterbacks, obviously we have Matthew Stafford here at 20, Tom Brady at 15. I don't think either of them are playing enough. Tom Brady's got too much going on off field. I think it's starting to affect his on-field play. Even though he has pretty much his full complement of weapons now with Julio Jones back, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, he's just not playing as well as he was. The offense isn't clicking the way that it was the past 2 seasons. I don't think this is too low. I think 15 is right about where I'd have him because he has next to no rushing upside. He doesn't really run the ball at all. And if he's not throwing picks, but he's also not throwing touchdowns, it kind of just leaves him right in the middle. He's throwing for lots of empty yards. And that's the way that he's been producing. I think that's what he's going to continue to do because, neither of these teams are that good. I don't think this has shootout potential, but I don't think it's going to be a low scoring affair. I think it could just be like, a 250-yard 1 touchdown day for Tom Brady. And that's right where he would be if he doesn't throw any interceptions here as a high QB2.
Let me ask you a question. If you had to guess, how many games has Tom Brady thrown for over 1 touchdown this year?
I'm going to go with 2.
1. He's
that
was against the Chiefs. He threw for 3 touchdowns against the Chiefs. Every other game, he's thrown 1 touchdown, except against Carolina where he threw 0.
Yeah.
So what you said, 250 yards and a touchdown, that line's right up.
Yeah,
pretty much.
That's what it is. With Tom Brady, it's like empty calories, It's like he's doing all this. They're pushing the ball downfield, but they're not scoring. Like, it makes no sense. I wouldn't expect it from a Tom Brady offense, but at this point, we can't say it's, just a weird trend and it'll wear off at some point. I think now we're pretty much entrenched, and this is the way it's going to be moving forward unless something changes big time. Maybe Tom Brady's mind clears up, as this divorce settlement blows over, but I don't think that's going to happen because the offense just isn't clicking. Mike Evans is dropping deep bombs. Like, this is just it's unprecedented territory. You know what I'm saying? And obviously we're still hanging on to that from 2 weeks ago, but it's just not the same offense that it was. I think this is where we're going to have Tom Brady until further notice.
It sucks because this is what he came back for.
Yeah.
And this is, if he stayed, like, listen, I don't know what's going on with him and Giselle, but I'm assuming it's football. I'm assuming a lot of it is because he came back for this season and, like, was it worth it? Right. Mm-hmm. But, like, who knows? Who knows what else is going on? Right. Like, I will never happens behind closed doors, but, it's like, as a married man myself with a couple of kids, it's just a sad situation, and like, you just wish that, things could be different, but who knows, right? Everyone needs to make their individual decisions, and like, you never know what's going on there.
Was
right? But
Tom Brady
just, it's sad.
Was Tom Brady re-signed to like an extension or anything? I think it was a 2-year contract they signed with Tampa.
Oh, was it?
I think it was. I don't know. I don't know if he was re-signed, but maybe he looks to go on the move. If he's not going to get it done in Tampa, maybe he'll just go to another contender. We'll see. Try to revive it that way.
I think you're right. I think he did end up.
Yeah.
I think he did end up going signing a 2-year $50 million deal, and maybe he does retire after this year, and ride off into the sunset single as fuck. Like, that'd be hilarious.
I don't know if he's gonna do that. I think he's gonna look at the field and he'll be like, well, if I'm here, I might as well stay for a little while. It's not. I mean, he's not playing the same, but he might have a little extra in the tank. Obviously at this point, he's a very old quarterback by any standard, but it's Tom Brady, so you don't want to write him off completely. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him turn around and go look around, see if he could get on another team for just one more year. Because at this point, this offensive production is just kind of showing shades of what New England's offense was doing when he was in his waning years there. So I think that maybe he turns around. Did somebody forget to tell him that the trade deadline was this week? You didn't demand a trade? I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. But I think Tom Brady, right now, this is where he's going to be the rest of the
season. All right, Zach. Go ahead and take the rest of the quarterback rankings. I'll be right back.
All right, cool. So Andy Dalton, we have at 16, followed by Taylor Heineke at 17, Derek Carr at 18, Jared Goff 19, and Matthew Stafford at 20. Andy Dalton has quietly been getting it done, and maybe not so quietly. Obviously, the Saints offense has been really productive without Jameis Winston in the lineup, which is weird to think because I wasn't thinking that Andy Dalton was going to be able to do this. But it's been not only better for the offense as a whole, but also Alvin Kamara. I think as long as Andy Dalton's starting and they're going up against a bad Baltimore defense, I think they should be able to get things done and keep producing like they've been the past few weeks. I'm not worried about Andy Dalton at all. Surprisingly, I might even put Andy Dalton over Tom Brady this week just because. I mean, we're just looking at the rankings here. I might put Andy Dalton over Tom Brady because of the way he's been playing has been much more fantasy conducive than the way Tom Brady's been playing. I'll take the guy that has a chance to throw 2 or 3 touchdowns, maybe 200, 240 yards than Tom Brady, who has, like I said, 250 for 1 touchdown. And we'll welcome back Faraz. He's kind of here. I'm not sure if he's going to jump on, but he'll be in here shortly. Taylor Heineke at 17. I mean, he's looking like what the Commanders need right now. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he's not a bad quarterback, and that's the way he always seems to come in. As soon as Washington has lost all hope, he comes in and he wins a few games. People question, why hasn't he been starting the whole time? And then he has a bad game, and you remember why he wasn't starting the whole time. We said about this, I think, a week or two ago when he first got the job. But he's looked good. He's been like, a dollar store fantasy quarterback with a little bit of rushing upside. He should be able to get it done for you this week. I think that he'll be able to set you up nicely, especially if you're hurting because of buys this week. You maybe have Dak, maybe you have another guy that's on buy. You should be able to get by with Taylor Heineke at this point.
Then, I think so. Can you hear me okay, Zach?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. He's a solid streamer at home against Minnesota. He's been using his weapons like pretty nicely. Like he's been using his running backs out of the backfield too.
Yeah.
Right. So like, one thing to keep in mind too, like we're going to talk about Etienne Gibson later. J.D. McKissick, a little bit banged up right now. Something to keep an eye on. But Gibson has been looking good for him in the receiving game lately. So he has another weapon that he's been using. In addition to Curtis Samuel and his boy Terry McLaurin, who's been killing it lately.
Since Taylor Heineke's come back,
with the new quarterback.
That might have been all you needed. Obviously Carson Wentz wasn't happy throwing to him. So if Taylor Heineke's going to throw to him, they paid him all that money. Might as well make the most of him.
100%. All right. Let's see. At 18, we have Derek Carr at Jacksonville. He's really disappointed over the last 2 weeks coming out the bye. He couldn't get anything going against the Saints, which is it was a beatable matchup, man, especially without Marshawn Lattimore. Like we mentioned, Derek Carr, when we need him to come through in a good matchup, he ain't going to come through. So I have him at 18 here. He's probably going to finish at like the quarterback 9 this week, most likely.
Yeah. That's how it goes. We talked about that yesterday. If we rank him high, he'll finish low. If we rank him low, he'll finish relatively high.
Yeah, pretty much. Jared Goff at 19 in a tough matchup against Green Bay, followed by Stafford at number 20. All right. let's get into the running back rankings. Austin Eckler at 1. He's the entire Chargers offense.
Yes.
At this point, right? Like that's it. That's all they got. So he's probably gonna get like 14 targets in this game. He's going at this point, based on the wide receivers being out, he's going to break the record for most targets and most receptions by a running back this year. Like it's gonna happen. As long as he stays healthy, that's what's gonna happen.
That's what's gonna have to be. Obviously it hurt having one of their receivers out, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams is still playing. That hurt already. We saw maybe Justin Herbert's play declining a little bit is because of that. He doesn't have that reliable receiver to throw to. Obviously Mike Williams is reliable, but he's more of a big play threat. Now they're missing both. Like you said, at this point, now Austin Eckler is RB1 and wide receiver 1. He's going to be doing his thing this week, regardless. I think this is one of the safest number 1 rankings that we're going to have, this season. I think that him at 1 this week is a perfect spot. And, Atlanta's defense isn't that good, so he should be able to take advantage of that pretty well. I'd be smashing the overs on a lot of his receiving props.
Yeah, for sure. I have Alvin Kamara at number 2 this week, and the usage has been bonkers lately. He's had the highest weighted opportunity of any running back not named Austin Eckler over the past couple of weeks. Over his past 4 games, he's averaging almost 25 touches a game, 7 catches per game, and 145 total yards per game. And our data analytics partner, Preciser, has this game at a total of 50 points with an implied total for New Orleans at 28 points, which is one of the highest implied totals for the week. And the Ravens have given up the 4th most receptions and the 6th most receiving yards to running backs this season. So Kamara is back. He's doing his thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy Dalton. Who would have thought we'd be saying that? Obviously the offense looked good enough with Jameis Winston last season, but with Andy Dalton, it seems like the whole offense is clicking on a new level. And like I said, Alvin Kamara, he's kind of proven me wrong. It didn't look like the offense was going his way. But since Andy Dalton stepped in, he's doing his thing. So I will concede. He looks like, a high-end RB1 right now.
Oh, yeah. And I have him at RB2 right now. At number 3, we have Derrick Henry. The Chiefs have let up a bit against the run lately. Early on the season, they're kind of stout against running backs on the ground on a per carry basis. But over the past 4 weeks, they've given up almost 5.8 yards per carry to running backs. So the only thing here is that we'll see if the Titans can stay with the Chiefs in this game. If the Chiefs go up big, if you look at the Titans' past games, like with Derrick Henry going off, like they haven't really faced any good offenses, right? And Henry has been able to take advantage of that. So if the game script shifts in this one, we might see a different outcome for Henry, but you're starting him either way.
Yeah, there's not a world where you don't start Derrick Henry if he plays. That's the bottom line. There's good matchups and there's bad matchups. I think even if Kansas City goes up, I think that the Titans defense, which is on a bit of a hot streak recently, like you said, they haven't played really many good offenses recently, but they're on a bit of a hot streak, so that momentum can carry into this game. It might help them to hold it within, Derrick Henry's striking distance. You know what I'm saying? So where even if they're up 2 touchdowns, that's not where you abandon the run. I don't think that they're going to be up 2 touchdowns for most of the game. I think that's just Titans should be able to keep it relatively competitive. And a big reason for that is probably going to be Derrick Henry. I don't have any reservation about starting Derrick Henry as a high-end RB1. And if he does any worse, I don't think his floor is much lower than RB1.
I have Travis Etienne at number 4, and this might be a little bit aggressive. But
I don't think so.
You don't think so? That's what I'm talking about, man. That's what I'm talking about.
I don't think so.
You look at what the Raiders have given up this season, right? The Raiders have given up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs, the 3rd most fantasy, that's for the season, right?
Yeah.
Over the past 4 weeks, the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs. Over the past 2 weeks, the 3rd most fantasy points per game to running backs. So that just tells you that the Raiders consistently stink against running backs, and they've been giving up a ton of production to running backs this year. And that's despite the Raiders being relatively solid against running backs for the most part on the ground on a per carry basis. It just hasn't mattered. They just have been, giving up fantasy points in terms of the touchdowns and receptions and all that. So Etienne should continue to do his thing. He saw a bunch of touches last week, and he got it done in a big way. He's their bell cow at this point.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. But Travis Etienne, you say, does it feel a little aggressive having him at 4? I don't think so. I mean, look at the rest of the field. Dalvin Cook he's been heating up a little bit, but the upside really isn't there. He hasn't been as explosive, I don't think, as Travis Etienne has been. Aaron Jones is there, but he's only come on because of his receiving. He had a big game on the ground last week, but I'm not sure if that's going to continue. That was just odd to see. You'd figure after
it was a little fluky.
Yeah, after a bunch of games of not getting it done on the ground, just showing up with 143 yards, that was a little weird. Rhamondre Stevenson, we just saw Dameon Harris cut in his workload. Kenneth Walker, he looked good. His production was just a little bit modest for my taste, obviously, with what we had seen the previous 2 weeks. Travis Etienne, I think at this point you could argue maybe Josh Jacobs over him, but I think Travis Etienne is undeniably top 5 this week because he did so well last week, and that was against a good Denver defense.
It really was, and Josh Jacobs, I would have put him at number 4 if it was a little bit of a better matchup, and the way the Raiders have been looking over the past 2 weeks, hasn't been great. And I have him at 5 here. Hopefully they'll be able to move the ball more this week against Jacksonville. Now the Jaguars have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to running backs this year. Jacobs only had 1 bad week, so I'm hoping that he can bounce back this week.
Yeah.
And then you have Kenneth Walker at 6, solid matchup against Arizona. Dalvin Cook at 7, who's been getting it done lately, right? He's been getting the work, he's been getting the touchdowns, and he's been used in the receiving game also lately, which is really good to see.
Yeah, it's good news for Dalvin Cook. Like I said, the volume is kind of becoming a necessity at this point, which is weird. Obviously he wasn't getting that 100%. A couple weeks ago, it looked a little bit more like a committee. It was a little too close to a committee for comfort, for me at least, especially if I drafted Dalvin Cook high. He's getting closer to cracking that ceiling that we were talking about him having, but he hasn't really had that massive game that, we really think he's supposed to have. I'm not sure if that's going to come, at this point, especially with, the Vikings getting a new weapon in the passing game. They're obviously a pass-first offense. Kirk Cousins is getting it done. Justin Jefferson isn't going to go away. Adam Thielen is a nice compliment. And like I said, with TJ Hawkinson there, I'm not sure how many targets are going to be going around. That receiving work that he's gotten recently might dwindle a little bit again down the line. But I think that he's still, a safe play as a running back. He's just not, what we wanted him to be necessarily. But that's not a bad thing. He's doing what he needs to do to produce for you.
Aaron Jones, I have him at 8, which is a little high for him usually, but he's had 2 good games. He's still not so easy to trust, but he has a good matchup against Detroit this week. So you're hoping that he's able to continue doing what he's doing. And, last week he had a big game on the ground. He got the volume as well in a negative game script, right, against the Bills, and he was able to get it done in a tough matchup. So the hope is that the Packers see that he's able to continue, to be really effective on the ground, and hopefully he gets his touches this week.
Yeah, that's kind of what you cross your fingers when you put him in your lineup. I'm like, hopefully he gets the touches that he needs to actually produce. Because in reality, Aaron Jones, he doesn't need that many touches to do well. He's not a guy where you have to hand him the ball like 25 times for him to have a nice game. I forget, somebody was doing that earlier this season. I forget who, but I'm just trying to come up with a comparison. But you get the idea. Aaron Jones, he doesn't need that many touches. He just, sometimes he gets it, sometimes he doesn't. He's gotten it the past 2 weeks, obviously 2 weeks ago in the receiving game. And then he just got he was really efficient on his carries last week against a good Bills defense. This is a really good matchup, which makes me a little bit more, a little bit less hesitant to start him. But I think that you still have to consider that the touches might not be there 100% and that the Packers offense isn't anything close to what it's been, obviously, in the past.
Rhamondre Stevenson, I have him here at 9. I had to put him up here, man. Despite Dameon Harris, getting a little bit of that share back last week, Stevenson has just simply been getting it done regardless, right? And he's been heavily used in the receiving game as well. And Indy on the low, they've let up a little bit against the run. They've given up 4.9 yards a carry over the last 4 weeks. So this is turning into a decent matchup. And who knows if Indy's going to be able to move the ball so well, with a banged up Jonathan Taylor, with Ellinger at quarterback against the Patriots. So this might be a situation where, Stevenson and Dameon Harris, who I think I have in the top 30, I think I have him right at RB 30 this week, could potentially, have some volume against this team.
Yeah, I like Rhamondre Stevenson at 9. He is far and away, the best running back at this point for fantasy. I'm not sure. I think Dameon Harris is still talented. I'm not saying that he should be starting over getting more touches than Rhamondre Stevenson. That's just the way it's going to be. But as long as Rhamondre Stevenson is getting these touches, we haven't really seen a running back get this type of volume from Bill Belichick in a long time. So I think we're just going to roll with this, let it keep happening. Rhamondre Stevenson's done really well for you these past 5 weeks even. I think it's going to continue. I don't see any, scenario where he doesn't continue to do his thing unless he gets hurt. At this point, it seems like he's a focal point of the offense and a good part of the offense at that. It's not like he's just, there and they're using him because he's the only one there. But if you have Damien Harris behind you and you're still taking majority of the snaps, you're doing something right. I think this is going to continue. He's going to continue to be a nice piece the rest of the season. You're probably really happy if you picked him up. I know you were pretty big on Rhamondre Stevenson coming in this season.
Oh yeah. Joe Mixon at 10, Leonard Fournette at 11, Dameon Pierce at 12. The Texans will probably close their eyes, like I said, at the box score. Give him some work. I think he'll continue to get some volume despite the tough matchup. So I'm good starting him this week over Miles Sanders, who has a better matchup than him. But I'd rather start the every down guy who's going to get volume, who's been producing every single week. Last week it was a little tough, right? But I don't want to use that one game against them. He still was able to come through with a decent, fantasy day for the most part. But Miles Sanders, here at number 13, who are you starting? If you had to choose between one of these guys, like, are you choosing Sanders and the good matchup, or are you choosing the volume with Dameon Pierce?
That's a really tough one. These guys are, neck and neck for me. I think the safer option is going to be Dameon Pierce. I think you're looking at better upside with Miles Sanders. Okay. I'll put it this way. It's hard to explain, but you can see it right here. Maybe not. Dameon Pierce's floor is lower than Miles Sanders, but his ceiling is also higher than Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders falls right in the middle, where I feel like he's going to have a good game regardless. It's not going to be an extreme production game for him. It's not going to be like he's going to be really low or he's going to have 30 points. But I think like 18 to 21 is going to be right where Miles Sanders ends up falling. And then Dameon Pierce, he could have 25 points. He could also have 8 points. So that's how I view this. Because of that, if you're playing for upside, you'd start Pierce. If you're playing for safety, you'd start Sanders. I'm going to start Pierce, even though I just said to sell him on yesterday's episode. Man, I might start Pierce.
You don't even need me on this episode because you could just debate with yourself.
Yeah, I just had a whole debate with myself. Well, I wasn't expecting to have that question posed. I'm just looking at these rankings. I'm like, okay, Faraz is starting Dameon Pierce, but I didn't think where I would start. I'm like, okay, now I just, I love
it. And that's how you come up with, like, that's how you work through these type of decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we were able to hear that firsthand.
I gotta go check my lineup.
Yeah, I got Jonathan Taylor number 14, assuming that he does play. If he does end up playing, I'm starting him. I'm not starting him as RB1, but I'm starting him as a high-end RB2, and I like Miles Sanders' matchup enough. And also, he's playing tonight, right? So if you have Taylor and Sanders, you don't know if Taylor's going to play, or if he gets limited today, he might be out. So you're going to play Sanders in your lineup in a good matchup.
Right.
Jamal Williams at number 15 here. Like I mentioned, I have him right above DeAndre Swift, who I have at 16. DeAndre Swift, when the head coach is coming out and saying, like, hey, like, he's not healthy. He's not, all the way there. He only got, 10 touches opportunities this past week. He looked all right. Didn't look really great in the rush game, right? And he's not all the way there. And they have a capable running back in Jamal Williams who's going to get volume. Green Bay is not good against the run. So if Jamal Williams gets 15 carries in this game, he could potentially be efficient on those 15 carries. And we know that he's the goal line guy, right? So if they're able to move the ball a little bit, he's had 2 touchdowns in a bunch of games this year. So that sort of upside, I feel like I'd rather roll the dice on Jamal, rather than, I know that Jamal, if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's probably only giving you like 6, 7, 8 points, right? Because he might not have a 100-yard game, but like he'll have his 60, 70 yards on the ground. The floor isn't so high, but I'm okay with it because of the upside that he presents with those goal line touchdowns.
Yeah. Like I said, this whole running back situation in Detroit is going to come down to the way that DeAndre Swift ends up falling on the practice report these next few days. If he's limited or worse the rest of this week, if he doesn't have practice or he's limited the rest of this week, I'd have Jamal Williams starting over DeAndre Swift. But if he gets, a full practice in at any point this week, I'd, feel pretty confident slotting DeAndre Swift in as my starter over Jamal Williams. If I had the choice, chances are you probably don't have both of them, but maybe you took, Jamal Williams as a handcuff. I'm not sure if you did, if how many people did that, but if you have to choose, just scroll back 15 seconds. You'll hear what I said.
It's so funny.
I can repeat it, but yeah,
I think yesterday we were talking about, like, like, yeah, you could sell Jamal Williams. And I still think he's a solid sell, but like, if you have him, you play him as needed. But I was like, oh, what, are you really going to play him over Jonathan Taylor? And like, I literally have him one spot behind Jonathan
Yeah,
Taylor here, and I'm like, oh, okay,
maybe.
wow, that's funny.
Hey,
So
well, you
yeah,
have
go ahead.
Jonathan Taylor over him at the end of the day, and that's the truth. You're not going to start. You're not going to start Jamal Williams over Jonathan Taylor unless Jonathan Taylor's injured, obviously. But
yeah,
which he kind of is. So that's
kind
funny
of
to
is.
think
So
about.
you got to think about it. It's a decision to be made. This is a big tier gap at this point. But Deontay Foreman, I have at 17. Chuba Hubbard did get a limited practice in on Wednesday. We'll see what his practice status is the rest of the week. It is possible that he's limited all week. If he is, then Deontay Foreman is a very, very solid start this week against Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati is a tough matchup, right? And it is possible that the Panthers don't get anything going against this team, right? Yeah. That is possible. It is in Cincinnati too. So, you kind of have to temper expectations a little bit for this entire offense. Like, don't expect them to go crazy like they have over the past couple of weeks. But I still think that if Chuba Hubbard is a little bit banged up still, not 100%, then it's going to be mostly Deontay Foreman getting the bulk of the work. And the way he's looked over the past couple of weeks, he could have another good week.
Yeah. I think that, you talk about a clear tier drop off here. I think that Deontay Foreman kind of, rides that line a little bit. I mean, Raheem Mostert, Devin Singletary, Khalil Herbert, that's a pretty big drop.
I agree, especially if Chuba Hubbard is still banged up. Like, I agree. I would put Deontay Foreman up here. Like, if Chuba Hubbard's out, I would probably put Foreman above Swift here.
Yeah, and that's the way it'd have to be. Obviously, Chuba Hubbard, his status isn't going to do too much in terms of our ranking of Deontay Foreman because, like we said, this offense, it should come back down to earth this week, with Cincinnati being pretty good on defense, even though they did just get walloped by the Browns. But that's for conversation for a different day. Deontay Foreman, I think, like you said, I think the tier drop off, he is like the transition between tiers. You know what I'm saying? Because he has a chance to be really good, but he also has a chance to be not so good because the offense is that bad. Deontay Foreman did it. He got the workload, and that's really all you need. A hat trick. He showed us that he can do what he needs to do for fantasy when he gets the workload, but we're just not sure what the workload's going to look like, or the game script's probably not going to be the same. We'll see how he gets used. But I think Deontay Foreman's head and shoulders above Raheem Mostert, but also Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift are, a step above Deontay Foreman at this point. He's like a page break. You know what I'm saying? He's doing what he needs to do.
And Raheem Mostert at 18, Devin Singletary at 19. Like, these two guys just got a couple running backs introduced into their backfields, right? And Mostert has a great matchup against Chicago on the ground. However, Jeff Wilson, is going to get a full week of practice, right, with the 49ers. I'm sorry, with the Dolphins. And, he knows the system. Like, this is his system that he's been in. So, like, it's not going to take much ramping up here. He's healthy. He's good to go. He's been efficient this year. And I can totally see Jeff Wilson being part of this rotation this week. And it's tough because, like, you had Raheem Mostert. You're riding him as a solid RB2. Great matchup this week. And I'm still going to start him as an RB2. But just kind of temper expectations and for the possibility that Jeff Wilson's introduced as like a 1B to Raheem Mostert.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all. We talked about this at length yesterday. I think Jeff Wilson is going to have a role in this offense just because of the familiarity with Mike McDaniel and Raheem Mostert. This offensive scheme, they dropped Chase Edmonds to bring Jeff Wilson in. They're probably sitting there like, okay, we got rid of Chase Edmonds. Who can we bring in? At this point, Mike McDaniel sitting there. Who can we bring in that's going to fill that role? Because Chase Edmonds obviously didn't do it. Be like, just get somebody that we know can do it, and they go get Jeff Wilson. So I think he's going to have a role. Definitely. I think Raheem Mostert, I might shove him down a few spots. Same with Devin Singletary. I think I'd move Khalil Herbert over both of them. Because like you said about the hot hand, we saw that in full swing last week. Khalil Herbert still looked good. We're starting to see more of a split between him and Montgomery at this point. Montgomery did lose that fumble. So Khalil Herbert, not only did he not lose fumble, but I'd argue he looks a little bit more explosive than David Montgomery. Montgomery's a good running back. Don't get me wrong. But Khalil Herbert seems to be doing his thing right now. And if they're truly riding the hot hand, I think that 20 might be a little low, especially with Raheem Mostert and Devin Singletary above him.
I really like Mostert's matchup. And I feel like, I have a feeling he'll probably get a little bit more work than Khalil Herbert this week. even
Right.
with Jeff Wilson potentially involved. But that's the reason why I have him at 18. Devin Singletary, we don't know, what Nyheim Hines' role is going to be. So this is a situation where, like, all right, you know what, like, I'm gonna still have him in. He's still attached to a good offense. I'm like, you know what, let me put Devin Singletary in there. And then Khalil Herbert, I agree, man. Like, he is on his way, to potentially start out touching, David Montgomery on a regular basis. Now, David Montgomery still saw 70% of the snaps last week, and Khalil Herbert only saw 28% of the snaps.
Yeah.
However, the touch, differential between those two guys is shrinking. And, I'd rather play, even though David Montgomery's playing 70% of the snaps, like, I would rather play Khalil Herbert because he's doing more with his touches right now. So I'm all about it. And this is a matchup, with Justin Fields getting better. If we're going to project Justin Fields that high, we have to kind of move this entire offense with him. Right. So that's why I have Khalil Herbert here at 20. Let's move on to 21 here. I think I have David Montgomery. Yeah, I have David Montgomery here at 21. Right after him, Tyler Algier at 22, who's been leading Atlanta's backfield. If Cordell Patterson is back this week, I'll move him down. I don't think he's going to be back this week. I think they're going to give him an extra week.
Right.
Kenyan Drake at number 23, assuming Gus Edwards is out this week. Is Kenyan Drake too low if Gus Edwards is out, or is this about right? I have him right above Antonio Gibson and Michael Carter.
He's not too low. I don't think you can rank him too low because we know he's liable to just throw up like a dud.
Yeah.
I think that, the volatility that he presents has him this low. Obviously, in a vacuum, you're like, oh, okay, running back getting probably majority of the carries, on an offense that's run first. He'd probably be as a mid RB2, without much competition. But this is Kenyan Drake. And I think Lamar Jackson is going to be doing his thing. He'll be making plays. Kenyan Drake, I'm not a big fan of him in this offense from what I've seen so far. I'm not expecting him to suddenly be a lot better than he has been. I think this is just based off of, the eye test and what we've seen, and you can't really rank him much higher than that.
Who do I have? Who do I have next? I didn't even see. Okay, so I have Antonio Gibson after him. Keep an eye on J.D. McKissic's availability this week. He has an injury. He didn't practice on Wednesday. If he's out, he actually split the passing down work a little bit with McKissic last week, and I don't know why. Like, I'm not sure if that was a role change, if McKissic was banged up in that game. We'll see. But if McKissic is out, Antonio Gibson is going to be moving up for me against Minnesota. He's going to be moving up to, I would say, I would move, if McKissic is out, I would move him above Raheem Mostert.
That's what I was looking at too.
Yeah, that's where I would move him above. I would move him he would be at like number 18 for me.
Yeah.
Because, James, listen, we talked about this, ever since Brian Robinson was coming back, man, that Antonio Gibson is just a better running back. And it's proven out to be the case, man. Like, he's been looking good. He's been efficient. And, he's being used in the pass game a little bit more. And now they're realizing, like, oh, like, this guy's actually pretty good. Yeah, no shit. He's a good player. So, if he's going to assume the passing down work and then also get some carries on the ground, that means he has a role on all three downs with J.D. McKissic out, if he is out. So I would move him up a little bit. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Okay.
Yeah, they're taking advantage of, his chops in the receiving game. Because, we said about him being a receiver converted to running back. I think they're finally figuring that out. They did that early on in the season. They're like, wait, he has hands. We can throw him the ball. We don't have to use him as a pure runner. And he can still get it done as a pure runner. But his full skill set, they're finally maximizing it a little bit. I agree. I've been a bit of an Antonio Gibson hater, not really because of his talent, but just because I thought that this coaching staff was, done with him. I thought they were looking at Brian Robinson as a new toy. And, Antonio Gibson's like, like that Toy Story clip. I don't want to play with you anymore. It's like, at this point now, it looks like Antonio Gibson, they're rediscovering it.
If you've been listening to me over the past couple of years, man, I've been high, then low, then high, then low on Antonio Gibson. It changes all the time. Mm-hmm. And if I love the player and he was used well, I'm going to be high on him forever. Okay. Yeah. But if the coaching staff doesn't seem interested, if they're bringing in Brian Robinson, if they're talking to other running backs, during the draft process, all of that, they're showing all the signs that they showed for Antonio Gibson for the past 2 years, I'm going to not be high on Antonio Gibson. Okay. It's all about opportunity at the end of the day. And if you're a talented running back and you're not getting the opportunity, it doesn't matter. You ain't going to be fantasy relevant, so that's what it comes down to. Now Michael Carter here at number 25, he was the primary running back for the Jets last week. 56% of snaps, ran a route on about 50% of dropbacks. Ty Johnson was like way too involved for me. Like, I don't know why. Even though, they did, introduce James Robinson into the backfield last week, he only played 22% of snaps and he had 30% of rushing attempts. So, we'll see what that split looks like this week, but it's, I think Michael Carter is still the 1A at this point, and I'm cool. Like, even though it's a tough matchup, I think he'll be involved enough to where he can be a solid, is a solid floor, I would say. Yeah. I don't think he has much of a ceiling though against Buffalo.
Yeah, no, I think that's the way it's been. I think we talked about this right when James Robinson got traded. We said that Michael Carter is still going to be the guy in this backfield with Breece Hall out now. Obviously, if Breece Hall was here, we wouldn't be having this discussion at all. But since Michael Carter is, the guy that's there, he's been there a few years, obviously much more than James Robinson. Ty Johnson's been there, but he's been in and out. I think Michael Carter's clearly the guy. That's really all there is to it. There's not much of a ceiling because, I'm not sure how good this offense is going to be anymore without Breece Hall. They obviously looked really good with Breece Hall. So we got a taste of it last week, what we could be looking at for the future. It didn't look too good, but, I think we owe him the benefit of the doubt after what we've seen, the rest of the season. I think we should give him a little time. Michael Carter can still be relevant. He can have those RB2 weeks, I think.
I have James Conner at number 26, assuming that he plays. I have no idea what the split is going to look like when he's back. I don't know how much work he's going to get. This rib injury is taking forever for him, right? I have Benjamin at 27, like right after him, because I do feel like it's going to be a split. This is assuming James Conner's back. I'm assuming a split in his first week back, if this is his first week back.
Yeah, and we thought he would play maybe last week, and he didn't. So who knows what's going to happen? Hopefully he plays. Obviously you can fire up Benjamin again as a nice play. If he doesn't, Benjamin had a quiet week last week after going off the week before, I think. But I think that, if James Conner starts, it's going to be both of them just kind of, killing each other as far as their ceiling goes. That's
but his Benjamin's usage last week was so good. 74% of snaps, 75% route participation. Like, it's been looking great. So, Darrell Williams is on IR. So if you have Benjamin, he should probably continue to be on your team. Like, don't cut him. He's like a season-long asset at this point.
Yeah.
Caleb Huntley you have here at number 28 because of the fact that the Falcons are going up against the Chargers. It's assuming that Cordell Patterson is not going to play this week. It's going to be Huntley and it's going to be Algier, who I have at 22. So Caleb Huntley as the second running back to Algier. I think both of these guys can potentially get it done for you in a really, really good matchup.
Yeah. Caleb Huntley is going to be the guy running the ball. Tyler Algier is going to be the guy catching the ball. That's what he's going to be. And they've been doing fine, the way they've been playing. I'm not starting Caleb Huntley and thinking that he's going to turn in, a fantastic performance. I think a touchdown is his ceiling, but, in a pinch, I think he can get it done for you.
Chuba Hubbard at 29, assuming that he plays. And then I have Dameon Harris at number 30. So, Chuba Hubbard, just real quick, before we end this, Chuba Hubbard, if he does come back, I would assume that he'll be a little bit limited. He won't be all the way there, right? Yeah. Like, especially the way that Deontay Foreman played last 2 weeks. And he'll be their passing down guy. That's how I'm looking at it. But, we'll see what that split looks like when he's healthy. And then Dameon Harris, like I mentioned earlier, good matchup against Indy. They've been letting up against the run lately. So I think both of these guys, I don't know how much Indy's, has like in terms of offensive firepower. So it's very possible both these guys, him and Rhamondre Stevenson, have a bunch of volume in this game.
Yeah.
And that's it, guys. Appreciate everyone listening. Again, just remember to if you want to enjoy tonight's game, and you're worried about it being a bad game, sign up with Underdog, use code UPPERHAND. You'll get you'll get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. So use the code UPPERHAND there at underdogfantasy.com or download the app. But I really appreciate everybody here. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you can download the podcast whenever you can, if you can subscribe to the podcast, that would mean the world to us. So we appreciate it. And we'll talk to you guys tomorrow. We'll be back reviewing Thursday Night Football, and we're going to go over wide receiver rankings and tight end rankings for week 9. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow. Later.